I'll just get my podcast editor to or me take it out. So,
Sure.
Alex Abraham, welcome to the podcast. I help welcome.
Thanks so much, Sue. I'm excited to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah. I want to start our podcast just a little bit differently than I usually start my podcast. I read the first chapter of your book, and I have to say, not only was it raw and vulnerable, I just got to the first chapter and I couldn't get beyond that because I didn't have time to read it. And I'm like, oh my God, where's the rest of the story? And then it left me, it left me wondering, do you want me to be honest?
Sure.
It left me wondering, "Oh my god, how are you even still here with what you walked through?" And the reason I say that is because and I don't know if you've battled with this because I haven't really gone into it, but I'm sure you battled with something, some demon. I battled with suicidal ideation for over 27 years. So to be in that depth, to go through deep despair and dark stuff, it's like I can relate on that type of level because reading your first chapter, you hit low of lows, and I'll let you go into your story and explain that and what you were experiencing because I don't want to give it away. I want you to tell your story. But then I think it's amazing and incredible within your story is how you found the root of your issues and then the method of treatment that actually did work. So I want to ask you the following question, and then it'll probably, and I'm sure it will transition really well into your story. So, what's the hardest thing you had to overcome in your life so far? And what were the small steps that helped you get started?
Sure. So unfortunately, I'll just not bury the lead here. I was serially sexually abused by an authority figure when I was 7, 8 years old. So I would definitely say that's the hardest thing in life I've had to overcome. And in terms of steps, obviously there's been many, many steps to getting there. But I think the biggest thing for me has been psychedelic therapy, psychedelic medicine. I've done MDMA assisted psychotherapy and psilocybin therapy and a little bit of LSD therapy as well. But I think those have been the most transformative for me. But then I've also done a lot of energy work or breath work with a practitioner. I've done talk therapy. I've done eye movement desensitization reprocessing, EMDR. I've done group therapy. I see an intimacy coach. I see a body worker. So I've done a bunch of different stuff that's helped me. I try to journal most days. I try to get a lot of time in nature. I try to eat well. So I think all those steps together have really helped me kind of start moving through my abuse and kind of go on to live a better life.
Yeah, well, let's backtrack a little bit because in reading your story, you didn't put two and two together in the beginning with the issues, the problems that you were having, and then you went to countless doctors, and everybody pretty much told you the same thing. Sounded like it's all in your head, and some of the things that you've gone through. As I was reading your first chapter, I went, "Holy shit!" I said,
Yeah,
holy moly. So back up a little bit and share a little more of your story as much as you feel
sure.
comfortable doing.
Yeah, so I had been on a trip around Europe, kind of a post-graduation college trip, and on one of the last days I was there, I was actually biking in the Netherlands for the day. And when I got off the bike, I felt sort of like a twinge in my pelvic region, so a place you really don't want to feel, sort of a twinge. And it felt kind of like I almost hit my funny bone somewhere, or like something was a little off. Not like super dramatic at the time, but it definitely felt a little different down there. And then in the weeks and months after that, things started to actually feel worse and worse and tighter, almost like a clenched fist in my pelvis.
Hmm.
So that actually, I had trouble, getting an erection. I had trouble defecating. I even had some urinary issues, and so basically everything was very tight and clenched up there. So it was very uncomfortable. I didn't quite know what happened or what to do about it. So I saw a bunch of different doctors. Originally, the thought was I'd had gotten some sort of infection, because it felt a little bit like a UTI, to be honest, at the beginning, and I wasn't sure what to do. So I was on antibiotics for a while, and then that didn't work. And then I saw a bunch of other doctors, and even if they didn't all say it was like in my head, because my pelvis was very clenched up and tight. Everybody that kind of felt down there could see like it wasn't normal. But they were all like, what do you think is wrong with you? Or like, what do you think the problem is? Basically insinuating I was like a head case, which obviously I was pretty offended about at the time. So
How old were you? Just
I
put it in
was
perspective. How old were you then and how old are you now?
sure. I was 23 at the time of the bike ride. or bike incident, and I'm 30 now. So it's definitely been a long 7 years
Yeah,
for
7
me.
years, yeah.
Yeah. So the next several years, 3 or 4 years, I traveled around the country to see doctors and physical therapists. I even moved with a relative so I could go see a specific therapist, and really nothing worked at all. I got some nerve injections done that didn't work, and Botox, all sorts of stuff. They gave me this kind of stick that literally like
Oh.
insert in the region, like to try to, I guess, back scratcher,
You know,
except
that was in the book. You can
yeah.
stop right there. I'll let people read that. You don't have to go into, because that makes, honestly, I read that part and like I was squirming. I'm like,
Yeah.
oh my God, I can't believe, I felt really bad for you. Like, I'm empathetic to begin with. Like, I can feel other people's pain. So like I was like, no, oh
Yeah.
my gosh. Yeah. You
Yeah.
must have been very, like, at that time, capture that. You must have been like frustrated, desperate? What was going through your mind while you were experiencing all this stuff and you didn't really know why?
I was very dissociative at that time. Like I didn't feel emotions very well. So I think I felt a lot of anger around this and a lot of sort of bewilderment. But in terms of like deep fear, sadness that sort of came later, I think I just tried not to think about it. It was almost like I tried to pretend it wasn't happening. To be long periods.
Denial.
Yeah, there, or even if not denial, I try to compartmentalize it because I just couldn't think about it all the time because it was so sort of panic inducing and frustrating. And I
Yeah.
didn't know, like when I wasn't seeing doctors, I wasn't sure how to figure out how to get through this because it was clear that like I wasn't healing. This wasn't getting any better. But other than to see doctors and physical therapists, I really had just no idea what to do. I ended up seeing a bunch of acupuncturists that really didn't work either. So yeah, so it turned out. So eventually, a doctor involuntarily discharged me, basically gave up and was like, I'm sure you're going to get better eventually. And that was like the 20th doctor I'd seen. And so at that point, I
Mm.
just really didn't know what to do. I saw over 20 doctors, 12 physical, pelvic floor physical therapists, like 6 acupuncturists. I saw a bunch of talk therapists. And so really
Yeah.
nothing was working for me. And so I'd heard from Tim Ferriss and Tucker Max, 2 people that I had kind of a pre-existing social media relationship with, about psychedelic therapy and how transformational it had been for them in healing childhood trauma. And so I told myself, I was doing this for anxiety and because it wasn't even about my pelvic floor at all at the beginning. I didn't even tell the guide I was having pelvic floor problems in the
Oh.
first session because I think I just couldn't put that two together at the beginning. But it turned out after a couple sessions, unfortunately, I've been badly sexually abused, by an authority figure, and that's why I was having all the pelvic problems. And when that originally came up, I felt like I was being re-traumatized again. I felt like it was happening again. I had a lot of taste memory and sense memory and all sorts of
Mm.
things like that when it originally came up. So it became pretty clear pretty quickly that is what had happened. And I sort of suppressed it because it was so painful and so bad. So yeah, once that came up, I think things got a lot worse in certain respects, because all the feelings and all the emotions and all the
Right.
bad
You have to deal with
energy,
that.
yeah, I pushed down when this all had happened. It started to come back up, and that was very tough to deal with. I also briefly struggled with suicidal ideation a little bit, and kind of just very down and very sad. But at the same time, that's also when I actually started working through it instead of denying it. And I think all the repressed emotions I had from it, until I sort of started working on those, there just wasn't going to be a resolution to any of my
Yeah.
physical problems. I was also having bad neck issues, shoulder issues. My whole
Yeah.
body was pretty screwed up and like
Yeah.
almost tight. So
It's amazing how things that we don't think that past traumas, past things that we've walked through actually do physically manifest themselves in the body. And I've been studying this lately as well. It's been kind of crossing my path on manifestation, law of energy, and how we hold everything in our bodies that have ever happened to us. And that thought right there is mind-blowing to begin with. But the one thing you were talking about was that you had to go through the rough part. You had to relive it again in order to get over on the other side. And it made me think of the picture of somebody, like, you're walking on kind of like gravel and bare feet. And it's like, it doesn't really feel great, but you're walking on it, and at least, you're on gravel. And then you have to walk over hot coals. But then on the other side of the hot coals is lush, plush green grass that your feet are really going to love. And it you telling your story made me think of that analogy that you had to go through the low in order to get to the other side. And it sounds like that was your pivotal moment, like when you started down this road with the psychedelics and the psilocybin journeys and stuff. So you weren't walking alone then. Talk a little bit more about that journey, how that came about. Well, you said from Tim Ferriss, but what that looked like early on.
Sure. So yeah, I found a guide. I'd never met her before. I just met her in her apartment in New York for the first time. And yeah, I've only done this with guided therapy or therapists. I can't imagine doing these tools by myself in like a recreational setting, particularly like psilocybin or LSD. I think it's very intense and can really trigger some tough stuff. So I would definitely, anyone looking to try this, I would definitely recommend working with a guide. So yeah, the first couple sessions were very tough for me. It actually took a couple sessions for my abuse to come out, but even before that, I think some of the feelings around it had started to come out, like concerns about my body, and sort of some of the shame and feelings around that. So yeah, I think from the second I started taking medicine, it was very difficult. I found a therapist I worked with every week, and that was helpful for a while. And then later, I moved to Austin and found a shaman. That I thought all shamans were kind of quacks to begin with, and I still think some shamans are quacks. But this shaman I work with, I really like. We've done a lot of great work together. She's been instrumental in my healing journey, and I think that comes out in the book. So yeah, I definitely try to integrate my experiences. I think all psychedelics do is sort of open the door for healing,
Mhm.
and they sort of help push repressed emotions and feelings to the surface. But ultimately, it's up to you to feel them and work through them and move past them. So that's what I try to do in my integration practice, whether that's journaling or talk therapy or group therapy and all the tools and modalities I mentioned before. So those have been all really instrumental for me.
Yeah. So, back to, I have a question for you. I was just thinking so in all of this, before you discovered the psychedelics, in all of everything before that, did it ever pop into your mind or occur that maybe the childhood trauma or the sexual abuse that you had as a child was connected in any way, shape, or form? Like, did you ever think about it, or was it ever a consideration, or did you just totally, was it so traumatic at that point, you just like repressed it, never thought of it, like buried it?
Yeah, I had no idea at
Oh,
all.
wow.
I would have said no at that time. I think
Yeah,
again, a lot of doctors are not very familiar with the mind-body connection and childhood trauma, so they would
sure.
be talking a lot about stress and in day-to-day anxiety. And so, I tried to go to a sauna. I tried swimming. Went on vacation. I tried a muscle relax and all sorts of stuff, and that wasn't
Mhm.
really working. So again, I think if I'd seen a bunch of I think more knowledgeable practitioners, I think that they might have pushed harder on
Yeah.
that, but they
Yeah,
really
you
did
have
not.
to go outside the conventional medicine to
Yeah.
find those things. Yeah. What was the most surprising thing of like, the most interesting or surprising thing to you about discovering the alternative medicine and realizing that there was this mind body connection?
I think the most interesting and surprising thing, definitely how strong the tools are. I would say, it never occurred to me that there are tools that were this powerful, the way psychedelics are. I would have thought therapy, talk therapy and like antidepressants were like the two modalities that people use to feel better. And I ended up trying an SSRI for a little bit, and I didn't really like the physical effects for me. So I got off it pretty quick. And then I had been doing talk therapy for some portions of my life. And so the idea that that was going to do it for me just wasn't, I think it was actually
Yeah.
true that talk therapy, which wasn't going to be enough for me.
Mhm.
But
What's talk therapy? Like, how is that different from traditional therapy or coaching or some other type of therapy?
Oh, I would just say I kind of lump talk therapy in all that's like, whether that's sitting on a couch for an hour, once a week, and like, how do you feel?
Oh,
Um,
gotcha.
and just because I think psychedelics can also be considered kind of a therapeutic tool. So I try
Sure.
to differentiate between psychedelic therapy and talk therapy, which would be talk therapy, would be more like what people originally envisioned for that sort of thing. So I done some of that, in college and beyond college, and that really just wasn't getting me anywhere. So I think definitely the idea that there are other struggle tools out there for people that are looking to heal was really news to me.
Mhm. How did you feel when you realized that the connection that what you were physically experiencing in your body was actually connected to the childhood trauma that you experienced?
Well, yeah, it felt, it was very re-traumatizing in the moment. I really was shaken for a long time afterwards because that was also the day I realized I'd been abused. I think,
Mhm.
even before that, I told myself that maybe I had some anxiety and I held some anxiety in my pelvic floor. I didn't make the connection to childhood trauma even then. So, it was very tough. I had a really hard time with it. I had to have my mom come out and help me for a while. I had friends visit. It was a very rough period
Yeah.
for me. I was barely getting through work at the time, and yeah, I definitely think it was a one of the worst periods of my life.
Yeah, you have to hit the low before you go high. Well, obviously, you're on the other side, so you took the small steps and you're here. Let's talk about your book, Trauma and Ecstasy. What prompted you to write your book?
Sure. I think there were a bunch of different things that prompted me. I definitely want to help people, and I think these tools can help people again in kind of a guided way, maybe not recreationally. And I think another thing is I don't want to push psychedelics onto anyone. I think these tools are strong enough where it has to call to you. Like you have to feel like it's something you want to do. I think to do it because somebody else told you to or because you feel like you should is generally not going to work very well, and actually can
I've
make things
heard that.
worse.
Yeah, I've
Um,
heard that before.
yeah.
That they pull you to them rather than you seeking it out.
Yeah.
There's something about that. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and so again, they've helped me a lot, but only other people can know if they're going to help them. So I don't want to be too evangelizing about it. Just talk about my own experience. So that was number one reason I wanted to write the book, and then number two is I actually did go public against my abuser. He actually is still in a school now,
Mm,
and I went to the police in my school system and was basically dismissed. And so I am hoping to still hold them accountable. We'll see what happens there. Either way, I'm sort of it's sort of out of my control in certain regards.
yeah.
So we'll see what happens there. And then number three is I'm not really sure what I'm going to do next as a full-time career. I'm still looking at different things. I am going to start a nonprofit around psychedelics and figure out some more things to do. But I hope this book can sort of serve as, what did I spend my 20s doing? And people can see that and read that and see if they want,
Yeah.
maybe other work opportunities can arise from that. And then the last reason is I think, 50 years from now, hopefully I'll have some grandchildren or whatever. And maybe they'll want to read the book at some point, probably not early on because it's pretty graphic. Um, but uh, but eventually, serve as almost like a legacy because this is a very intense period in my life. I think it
Sure.
will be one of, if not the defining period of my life. So I think to have some sort of written record about how it went from my perspective will be kind of therapeutic in that regard.
Yeah. What was one of the most surprising things that came out or results after releasing your book that you didn't expect?
The book is actually not released yet. The book
Oh,
is
it's
coming
not?
out in September.
I'm so sorry.
No.
Oh, okay.
So I am putting the finishing touches on it now. But yeah, for people, September 3rd is going to be the release date.
Okay.
For anyone that wants to read it. But yeah, I think we're going to find out what the response is. It's very vulnerable, or I feel very
Yeah.
vulnerable to put that out
First
there.
chapter was,
Yeah.
first chapter was, I'm so I wrote a book as well. I don't know if you knew that. My book is also coming out in September, but the first edit is completely done. And for me, writing a book was definitely cathartic. It
Yeah.
was definitely, you dug into stuff you didn't really force yourself to dig into, and you just like you write stuff and you go, "Wow, okay, I didn't realize that." Did you have writing in you, or did somebody say to you, "Hey, Alex, why don't you go write a book?"
I really enjoyed writing as a kid, like a little kid. Honestly, when a lot of abuse is going on, I really liked writing, and then I kind of gotten away from it after I would say, I had a lot of school to do, and it's hard to write when you're. I mean, I guess I did a lot of school writing, but free writing I wasn't doing very much of. And
Mhm.
then so I hadn't taken a writing class since high school, And in college, I'd never written anything, and even after college. But my shaman, the person I do psychedelics with, was like, it would be good to write a book about this. I think it could help people. I think it could help
Mhm.
you. So I originally I hired a ghostwriter to sort of help me scribe, and I just felt like eventually I wanted to write the book myself, just because it was so personal and so therapeutic. And I think also it's pretty hard to write about psychedelics from another person's perspective because it's so
Sure.
internal. So I ended up writing the book myself with the help of an editor. I think the good thing for me is I've been doing so much therapy that it wasn't. I think for a lot of people, books can be sort of a rediscovery process. Like, how did I really feel here? But because a lot of it was so fresh, much of the book takes place in the last couple of years. So that was really helpful. And then I already sort of been looking at all this stuff anyway by doing all my therapeutic work. So
Mhm.
it was not that I didn't really discover that many new things from writing a book the way a lot of people do, because I sort of already knew how I felt about all this stuff
Right.
because I was looking at it in all my psychedelic sessions. So in that
Yeah.
sense, I think it was very good to write a book right now instead of waiting 5 or 10 years.
Yeah, that makes sense. Out of writing your book and, all that you've walked through so far, what's something that very few people would agree with you on in your journey?
I would say, I mean, it's hard to get public opinion on some of this stuff, but I do think there's still a lot of backlash around psychedelics, and I do think that with the right tools and therapies in place and integration processes, they do work. Another thing I would say is microdosing can really help people on kind of a more of a day-to-day basis. I think there's still a lot of backlash around that in certain
Mhm.
respects, and then so I would say the big things would be around psychedelics, but it's hard to assess who agrees with who these
Mhm.
days because it sort of defies the conventional like political paradigm. Like
Sure.
I've seen some right wing people and left wing people are both pro psychedelics and then vice versa. So that's definitely something that comes up for me around psychedelics and kind of its healing properties and whether these tools should be legalized for therapeutic use.
Okay. Yeah. Now, you're not that old, but I want to ask you this question. If you could go back to your younger self and deliver a message, what would it be? What would you say and
Uh,
why?
yeah, I would definitely tell my younger self when this was all going on in terms of my pelvic floor issues before I started doing psychedelics. It was going to be okay. I was pretty in the rut. I would have given my younger self a hug more than say any
Mm,
words of wisdom. But I was really struggling for a long time. I didn't know what to do, and I would have. I sort of lost hope at times that like I was going to get through this, and I think the good part for me is I was so disconnected from my emotions that I really didn't actually feel that much sadness because I couldn't feel anything, if that makes sense. And so I would have given myself a hug and like it's going to be okay more than any sort of uh, advice, if that makes sense.
yeah. Yeah. You mentioned a couple times about being disconnected from your feelings. What kind of work have you done around that to reconnect with yourself, to give yourself that hug that you need?
Yeah, I think I've definitely worked. I think energy work or breath work has been really good for that in a non psychedelic fashion because I think when you breathe for a while, you can actually sort of get into these emotional
Mhm.
states and get into your deeper thoughts and feelings. So I would say for people who aren't into psychedelics or don't want to go that route, breath work has been really good for me. I would say journaling for sure has given me a better sense, and also just sort of I have some take photos of myself as a kid and sort of other written work from myself as a child. And honestly, those make me cry a lot. They're pretty sad to look at in certain ways. And I do think that crying in certain respects is good because I'm ultimately mourning a childhood that I didn't. I think innocence was lost pretty quickly, unfortunately. And so I think looking into that, all that stuff can kind of get me in touch with that
Mm.
inner child.
Mm. How would so, where you are today, what is some advice that you would give to somebody who would be struggling with this type of trauma or trauma in general?
Yeah, I think I always try not to give blanket advice because I think a
Right.
lot of it's contextual. But I would
Sure.
definitely say I think it's really hard to heal from this stuff by yourself. That doesn't mean like oh you should get like I don't get a bunch of therapists, but I think I think healing is very much a contextual thing. If you look even to like ancient Rome or whatever, there was a healer in the community that helped people. It wasn't generally people just like worked through it all by themselves. So I would definitely recommend getting some sort of help from, especially if you're suffering from something like childhood sexual abuse. I think it's very hard to heal from that by yourself. So that would be. I think sometimes people tell themselves that like I worked through it because I don't know, I thought about it for a lot one day, or like I wrote
Mm,
about it once. And I definitely think whether that's a shaman or a therapist or even a friend or a family, somebody besides
somebody.
yourself.
Yeah, yeah. What's one thing that you thought would be difficult about your journey and it turned around, it really wasn't, and then flip the question, what did you think would be easy and then wound up being more challenging for you?
I would say the first draft of my book was actually much easier than I expected. I thought it would be, people were talking about how hard it was, but it really flowed out of me. So that was really that surprised me. I would actually say the second and third and fourth draft were much harder because I think the first draft I knew it wasn't going to come out anytime soon, and I knew it was going to change a lot. So I really didn't have very much fear in the back of my head about like, what is this going to look like to people? Like, what are people going to think about it? Whereas each successive draft, I've gotten more and more scared about it coming out, if
Mhm.
that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because so every time I get panicked. So I would say the first draft was something that I thought was going to be hard, but actually was not that hard. And then in terms of something I thought was going to be easy that actually turned out to be hard, I would say my entire therapeutic journey. I would have thought I would do a couple sessions and feel a little better, and that was going to be it. That was before I realized I got abused. But
Mm.
at the time I was like, I'm going to do MDMA like once or twice. Maybe I'll feel a little better and that'll be it. And I didn't think that I could I didn't think I could make fundamental changes, but I also didn't think it would be nearly as hard as it turned out to be.
Mm. So you've been through a lot in the last couple years, and I can almost see like a definitive line in your life, the before and after. What does life look like for Alex Abraham now, today?
I'm still actually doing a lot of therapeutic work around my abuse.
Sure.
I'm still dealing with some body issues. I think that'll be last. They've gotten a lot better. Like I was really struggling body wise before, and now I
Mhm.
would say I'm like okay, but definitely still having some problems there. So I'm still doing psychedelics regularly, but they've gotten a lot easier. Before I used to scream the entire time, and now I don't really do that. So I think that's been a big improvement. And then in terms of
Did you just say you used to scream the entire time? You mean like
yeah.
while you were doing the psychedelics?
Mhm.
Really?
Yeah, it was pretty
Wow,
rough.
'cause I've heard of, like, I haven't dived into it a lot, but I know of some people who have done it, and I hear the report, they come back and say, "Oh, I journaled 20 pages," or, "I sat and cried a little bit," but the screaming end of it was, obviously, you're still like, you understand that that's what's happening. How did you process that? Like, because screaming's pretty intense. How did your shaman walk you through that when you came out of the first or second
Um,
journey, or what was that like?
yeah, that was actually more like the 10th journey, just to give
Oh,
you
really? Okay.
yeah, yeah, I think
Sorry, I should have asked which one.
no, no, there was a lot of screams. There have been a lot of screams. I
Wow.
think psilocybin in particular really kind of brought that stuff up in me. But I think, during my abuse, obviously a lot of that's very silent. Unfortunately, there was not a lot of screaming when that was going on. Just because like you're so kind of I was so dissociative and like pretending it wasn't happening. And
You're
so
7. Like, how do you
yeah,
even process that? I mean, think
yeah,
about being 7 years old and you're not even formed. You don't really know that is it wrong? Is it not wrong? Is it what's going on? I trust this person and they're telling me
yeah,
this is, but it doesn't quite feel right. You probably wanna scream on the inside and you can't because
exactly.
you don't know how to process that at 7 and 8 years old. So maybe it's just
Yeah,
your 7 and 8-year-old self was coming out through your journeys.
exactly. And yeah, but
Wow.
those screams, they don't go away. They just kind of store in you. And then it's up to,
Yeah.
I think, through the psychedelics and through the other work, I've been able to sort of move through some of them. I think there are still actually some screams left, but yeah, I think I moved through a lot of them. And things have gotten better for sure. So yeah, it was very intense. It was very rough. Me and my shaman had some very tough sessions where things got very personal and intense.
Mm.
And yeah, it is the first year was extremely difficult. So I would say my whole therapeutic journey, again, it's been very tough. And sorry, I lost track of the original question. I
No,
apologize.
that's okay. No, 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 you answered. You're all good. No, it's fine. You've been through a lot of challenges. So what's your approach now to facing challenges as they come your way?
I like to try to face them head on. I'm not sure I always do that, but that's certainly my intention. To kind of to not avoid them and kind of. I think one really thing that's helped me is I do have a shaman that's very to the point and very honest and very direct. And so she'll tell me like if she thinks I'm not doing something right, or I guess not feeling my emotions or avoiding something. And so I definitely think it's people have a hard time kind of not looking through their own BS, so to speak, or at
Mhm.
least I
Yeah.
do. So
Yeah.
so I think one good thing for me is try to surround myself with people who will tell me when things are not going well, or like I'm not you know not living to my true self or whatever.
Mm.
So I think it can be really good to have people around you, whether that's a spouse or a friend or even a professional person that like that kind of because I think you can tell when you talk to other people about some of your plans or some of your decisions or some of your thought processes where things are going awry.
Mhm.
Like in a way you can't always see in yourself. Like I was
Mhm.
talking to a family member yesterday, and he had a bunch of ideas about the future. And then I asked him some questions about it, and he's like, "Well, maybe you're right." And so again, not the sense that like I'm the only one that can do that, but everybody I think could use a person like that in their life.
Yeah, yeah, it does help to have somebody to call out your own BS.
Exactly.
I have my coach, he does that for me,
Yes.
and, so much so I wrote a book about him
Great.
as well. So, like and he's threaded through my journey as well, 'cause I relate to the first draft just fell out, but it's certainly not the final draft, and as you
Yeah.
keep going through it, you go, "Wow, okay, there's more. Oh, there's more. Okay, I gotta go more and deeper on that too." But challenges are interesting things for people, and, you know, what are some of let's get practical for a few minutes. What are some of the routines or tools that you use daily to help kinda anchor you as you're going through this healing process?
Sure. So yeah, swimming for sure has been a good one for me, especially in Texas. You can swim a lot of the year outdoors, so that's good. And then I would say journaling, as I mentioned a couple times before, trying to spend as much time in nature as possible, eating good food. I try to avoid a lot of processed food. I try to eat whole meat, whole protein heavy meals because I definitely notice when my food gets off track, I don't feel as good, I don't sleep as well. Doing what I can to sleep well. I don't always sleep well, but definitely taking the steps to make that, whether that's blackout curtains or an eye mask or a cold room or not eating right before bed or trying to go to bed at the same time every night. I think avoiding screens. So all those things I think have been really helpful for me in trying to get better sleep and trying to get more ordered sleep because I was really struggling to sleep for a long time. For years I'd have a problem with that, and I still and don't sleep amazing all the time, but definitely much better. So I would say all those things, and then yeah, I would say grounding. Putting my feet on the bare earth has been really good
Mhm.
for me. I have a park I go to where I take my shoes off, and so I think all those things that help me on a day-to-day basis to sort of feel better, along with all the therapeutic work that I do.
Oh, cool. Um So, all of my guests, when they come in, I ask them the same 3 questions. So, let's jump into those. These are my core 3. So, the first one's easy. The second one can, extend the podcast another 15 minutes. And then the third one, I ask everyone. The first is, what's a book or resource that had a significant impact on you in your journey?
Sure, I'll pick a couple. I would say
Sure.
Tim Ferriss's story about his childhood abuse had a big impact on me. That's something that triggered my own wanting to do my own healing work. I think if you just search Tim Ferriss trauma, it will come up. Unfortunately, he was also sexually abused. So that was a big impact on me, and that's in my book a little bit. And then I would say the book How to Do the Work by Nicole LaPera has been really good. She really gets trauma, I think, and gets healing. And I think her book has a lot of good strategies and kind of understanding about how that all works. So I definitely think that that's a good serve as a good roadmap for me and my healing journey. And it's definitely I have a whole resources section in the back of my book about stuff that's helped me, and that's for sure in there.
Oh, Cool. What is one question or topic you wish I would have asked about, and how would you have answered the question or expanded on the topic? And I know it's a Pandora's box. It's
Yeah.
all good.
I would say maybe what are the downsides of psychedelic medicine?
Oh,
I think
yeah. I
I
don't know
think
why I didn't ask that. Yeah, let's go there. I think that's an excellent question. Yeah, what are the downsides that besides it bringing up stuff that you had to deal with again? What are some of the other things that you
y-
would throw
yeah,
in
I
there?
think I think it really derailed me for a little bit in terms of getting out of routines and sort of work wise it hurt me a little bit. I think I didn't feel like the same person for a while. So I
Mm,
definitely think like I don't know if you're getting like married in a couple of months or like you're switching jobs or you're kind of immersed in day-to-day life, this might not be could not be a good fit for a second, or you might want to wait a little bit. So I would say that. And then I think also people try to go right back to work like the next day after doing this, and I do think that can be pretty challenging. I try to take at least a couple days where I don't really do very much. That's why I try to do them on Friday, so I have the weekend to kind of reorient myself. So I would definitely say these tools are no joke, and they can get very intense. And I definitely think it's also good to, if you're going to do them, to work with people who know what they're doing. I hear all these horror stories in Austin all the time about like these like rent-a-shamans who are like leading ayahuasca groups that don't know what they're doing, or they go to Peru and like are defrauded by some crazy group. So I do
mm,
think it makes sense to do your research about where you're doing this. And I think doing medicine in big groups can also be. I've only ever done them individually because I think for me, it's been very important to do them kind of by myself because I don't want to kind of get focused on other people's stuff.
mhm.
Like I wouldn't, I think,
I've heard that before.
yeah, like
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to scream and then have other people, hear my screaming and then ruin their experience, or they scream
Yeah.
and then get into
Ruins
my,
yours. Yeah, get
yeah,
in your head. Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah. I mean, if you once you understand how energy works and that we are all energy beings, we admit
yeah,
it. We have high, we have low energy. If you're doing that kind of deep work and you're in a room with other people, you can't help it, but you're going to absorb the things that they're giving off. And that's not it with the state that the psychedelics put your brain in. I would imagine you don't want to be there when other people are having their experience as well, because you don't want to take on somebody else's experience. You're trying to deal with your own trauma.
yeah,
Like,
exactly.
why would you want somebody else's there? And it is a personal thing. That it's an excellent point.
Yeah,
Glad
and
you brought that up.
maybe in the future I'll do it with a group. I not anytime soon, and I don't really see as much of the benefit. But other people tell me there's a lot of benefits, so I'm not going to totally rule it out. But that
Mhm.
being said, I don't have the bandwidth to. I still have enough trauma myself to not not
Yeah,
uh not have the bandwidth to take on other people's stuff or have them
right,
take on my stuff. So
right.
I can't imagine doing these tools in big groups. So that those are all kind of some of the downsides, I think, of doing psychedelic medicine. And also, of course, these tools are still legal for now. I think it's going to change pretty soon. I think MDMA is going to be legalized this year. And I don't think they're really prosecuting people, although I'm not a lawyer, so I try not to give legal advice.
Yeah, no,
But I think, yeah, I think those would be some of the downsides of what can go wrong with these tools. Not to mention all the painful stuff that can come up, like doing
sure.
these at a concert. Like, if you're trying to vibe to music and then like you're being re-traumatized by something that happened at like 9 years old, I think
That you
that's
didn't
gonna,
even know was gonna
yeah,
come up when you
I,
do that in the first place, because you didn't know it. I mean, that
yeah,
that was your journey at the beginning. You didn't know that all the childhood sexual trauma was going to come out until, like, the 3rd, 4th, would you say, 10th,
yeah,
So, and that was the trigger for you, but that doesn't mean it can't be triggered on the first time for somebody else. So, yeah, it's a
yeah.
good point.
So
Really
all
good
those
point.
are some of the downsides about what can go wrong here. So
Yeah,
I hope I've provided a balanced enough perspective, because I do see a lot of psychedelic boosterism that like everyone should do this, or this is something everyone should experience before they die. I don't really think that's true. People can make their own decision. They're ultimately just tools to help do the work inside of you.
good point. That's a great point. They're just tools. It's just another tool in the toolbox, but to use your tool responsibly, you don't wanna take a chainsaw to something that requires a flashlight.
Exactly.
You know? So, yeah, great point. So, as we close, coming down to a close here, what's one small step that someone can do today that's gonna help them change their tomorrow?
I would say, kind of really looking at yourself and maybe doing some journaling. Kind of really ask, maybe take some time to go for a walk and ask yourself the deep questions like, am I living the way I want to be living? Am I happy in my relationships? Am I happy with my work life? And I think a lot of people are so focused on getting through each day, like I don't know, the meeting I had this afternoon or whatever. They don't take the time to ask themselves like the deep questions, like. And again, not to say you need to ask those like all. First of all, no one
Mhm,
needs to do anything. So let me rephrase. Not to say that every single day you want to be like focused on the high big picture like high stuff. But again, I do see some people like sleepwalking through like they don't like their job. They don't have a partner. They don't have a partner they like. That they're not living in a place they want to be living. That maybe they've gained some weight. And it's like what are we doing here? Because I do think time is finite, and I
sure.
think I think we're eventually it's going to run out for all of us. Obviously myself included. So I do think and I think people really look at yourself. It's difficult, but I think eventually you by figuring out what's going wrong, you can, if anything is going wrong, you can kind of pivot to make changes. Whereas if you don't really look at yourself, or you're not really thinking, what is actually going on, what am I doing every day? Like, is that something I want to be doing? Then, people just keep doing it and then they kind of
Right.
get stuck.
Sounds like self-awareness. Once you get that self-awareness is the key,
Yeah,
in a
exactly.
process. Yeah, yeah. Well, that's great. Thank you. Thank you for that small step. So, Alex, how can people find you and reach out to you?
Sure. I'm on Instagram, Alex Abraham 1122. I'm still working through that. I've been so focused on finishing my book that I haven't done much marketing yet, but that's going to start pretty soon as the book is finished. And then I'm working on my website this week. So again, I'm going to have a lot of marketing, I think, later on, but definitely starting the process now. So I definitely can be reached on Instagram. I'm happy to answer any questions or any feedback people have.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time. This has been an amazing conversation. I'm so glad we got a chance to talk.
Thank you, Sue. I'm so grateful to be on the podcast, and I love talking to you as well.